A lot of fun. One of those, we'll never be able to solve the question. But here's what the writer of this book, here's how he starts off. Verse 1 again, chapter 1. In the past, God spoke to our forefathers through the prophets at many times in various ways. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom he made the universe. This person, this Jesus who he's talking about, he says he's the Son of God. You want to know more? Go to John, the first chapter. Yes, maybe to the book that his own cousin wrote. John's gospel, we know, was probably the last of the gospels to be written. Certainly, possibly, other than the Revelation, one of the latest books of the entire Bible to be written. There's a lot of reasons for that. Again, see me later. Here's how John introduces the main character of his book. He says there in chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God. And here's the key. The Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him, all things were made, and without him, nothing was made that has been made. Are you hearing those same thoughts, those same themes come out of Hebrews, come out of John? Look at verse 14. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Who came from the Father? The Son came from the Father. Again, these images. And now we go to another one. Go to Galatians, the 4th chapter. This was written by the Apostle Paul. So we got the writer of the Hebrew letter. We got the writer of the Gospel of John. Now let's go to Galatians. Paul. Who was Paul? Paul was a guy, remember how he started off his career was persecuting Christians? Because he just didn't like the way. And he was out arresting people and putting them in jail and seizing their assets and doing all these other really fun things, right? Paul, 3 or 4 years after Jesus ascended into heaven, he meets Jesus on the road to Emmaus. Now, maybe that would get your attention. A dead guy is this bright light on the road. Saul, why are you persecuting me? Who is this? And here's what this Saul, now we know as the Apostle Paul writes in Galatians chapter 4, verse 4. But when the time had fully come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive full rights as sons. Who did Paul believe Jesus was? The Son of God. Born of a woman. They knew that woman to be married. Isn't it amazing? Absolutely agreement, one after another. And then there's Peter. Go to 2 Peter. 2 Peter, that first chapter. Peter, he was the one that at Caesarea Philippi, and some of you have been with me there before, and I pray that others will go with us next year as we go to on our another Holy Land pilgrimage. When you stand below this huge part of the mountain, that if you keep going up, you end up at the top of Mount Hermon. And Caesarea Philippi, just this rocky place, really amazing. Jesus is there one day with his disciples, and beautiful water. It's the headwaters of the Jordan River. It's absolutely stunning in its beauty. And he said, "Who do men say that I am?" And they said, some say Elijah, some say, John the Baptist, kind of, reincarnated kind of thing. And then Jesus says, "But who do you say I am?" What did Peter say? "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus went, "Good job, Peter, good job." And he goes, "Flesh and blood has not revealed that to you, but my Father in heaven." And he goes, "Upon this Petros," Petros are little rocks. Petros is what you have in your yard, okay? But upon this, you are Petros, you are Peter, you're the little rock. But upon this Petra, and Petra is the big rock that's a foundational rock. It's the mountain rock. Upon this Petra, I will build my church. What Petra? What the truth that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. Here's what Peter writes about that person in 2 Peter, the first chapter, starting in verse 16. We did not follow cleverly in... I'll get this right. We did not father. Boy, once you start down that road, it just keeps going down. Okay, glad it's not live. Okay, we did not follow cleverly invented stories when we told you about the power and coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. But we were eyewitnesses of his majesty. For he received honor and glory from God the Father when he came from him from from the majestic glory, saying, this is what God said, "This is my Son whom I love. With him I am well pleased." We ourselves heard this voice that came from heaven when we were with him on the sacred mountain. He's talking about the Mount of Transfiguration. They were standing there, and there was the three inner circle, Peter, James, and John. James would be the first disciple to be martyred. Peter would be the disciple that declared the gospel for the first time on the day of Pentecost. John would be the disciple who would be given the revelation and truly give us a view into heaven that we still have hope for today. These three special men, they were up there when Moses and Elijah and Jesus are standing up there glowing in white. I love when Peter says, "Hey, Lord, should we build 3 tabernacles to you?" Because he didn't know what else to say. Put his foot in his mouth. No, that's not necessary. And then God speaks from the cloud. "This is my Son." By the way, would that leave an impression on you? You betcha. And so Peter, the rest of his life, all of these men, they went to their deaths swearing that Jesus was the Son of God. They went to their deaths swearing that they had seen him and touched him and eaten with him after he was crucified, after he was in the tomb for 3 days. And Paul said, "Well, I didn't meet until 3 years after that." Well, and they went to their deaths doing that. Even John, who the only one of the original group that died of old age, you know, they tried to boil that guy to death in oil. I just don't think that was a good day. Okay? John never would give up that he had seen the risen Lord. See, only the Son of God would have the power to be over death. And Jesus demonstrated that because he said, after 3 days, guess what? I'm coming to life again. And he did. Which brings us to this. So Mary knew where Jesus was. She knew his lineage. The disciples all knew his lineage. Thirdly, we must each decide what we will believe about Jesus. So let's go back to John's account of the disciples' first meeting with the resurrected Jesus. Now, that was on a Sunday. We call that the Lord's Day. This is the Lord's Day. Why? Because the Lord raised from the dead on this day. So it became the Lord's Day. So they're up in the upper room, same place they had the Lord's Supper, and they got the door locked, and weird things have happened. First thing in the morning, some of the women come, "Oh, you gotta let us in! Oh, you gotta let us in! The tomb's empty." What? Peter and John sprint down there. John was the younger guy, so he beats him there. They go to the tomb, nothing there but the burial cloths. Now, we don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure they brought those with them. Okay? You're not leaving those there. So they grab those and take them back and say, "Look, guys, here's a burial cloth." 2 other guys end up there just as sun is going down. They say, "We were walking the road to Emmaus, and guess who met us? Jesus did. Wow!" And the rest of them are going, "You know, I just don't know about this. It doesn't seem a little freaky. You know, maybe you guys need some fresh air. Quit smelling that incense so much." And so there's all these confusing things. The sun now is down. The door is locked. People they're arguing. No. You had to imagine this. Look at chapter 20 of John. Go to John, the Gospel of John, chapter 20. I should have told you to go there already. I get so excited telling these stories. I love telling these stories. I never get tired of telling these stories. I tell the same stories every year. I love it every time. John, the 20th chapter. Look, pick it up at verse 19. On the evening of the first day of the week, when the disciples were together. Now remember, there's 10 of them. We'll find out one's missing here in a minute. There's 10 of them, but not just the disciples. There was probably the guys who were on the road to Emmaus. Maybe some of the women were in there. We don't know that all for sure. With the doors locked for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said, and this is where I think Jesus got a great sense of humor. Okay? Because Jesus stands among them and says, "Peace be with you." What would you do if a guy all of a sudden beams in the middle of the room? Nobody's in the middle of the room. Everybody's against the wall going, "Ah!" Seriously. It would freak your brains out. They didn't have Star Trek. They didn't know about Beamy and Scotty, okay? But the door was locked, and now the dead guy is standing in the middle saying, "Peace be with you guys." I think he just had this great grin. "Peace be with you all." Okay? Look what he goes from there. After he said this, he showed them his hands and side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. And I don't know how it happened. I don't know. I think he would have walked around the room. And maybe they'd heard the floor creak. How important is that? We know that from the account, at one point he goes, "Can you get something to eat?" Do ghosts eat? And you think, see, these people would have thought maybe they were seeing a ghost. No, because I think there was touching, I don't know what I'd have done there. Could kind of one of these numbers as he walked by, reaching out and just seeing if it's real. Just shaking. Not being able to ask any questions, but you want to touch it. Like a little child, whoop, put the hand through the, right through. I don't think I'd do that. But you'd want to. One disciple, Thomas, was missing. And a week goes by. We pick it up in verse 24. Now Thomas, called Didymus, which means the twin, one of the 12, which was only 11, remember Judas had killed himself, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, we've seen the Lord. And you know what? And then Thomas looked at them like they had 3 heads. And went, you're out of your gourd, dudes. You guys need to get some fresh air. Now, here's what he says. He says to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe it. I don't like it when they told Thomas the doubter. I think it's Thomas the honest one. Because if you came and told me that a dead guy appeared at your place of business, I want to know what you were saying. Straight up. I want to say, what? What? I love Thomas, man. He's got some of the best questions in the New Testament. I just love this guy. Well, look what happens, verse 26. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, same upper room. And Thomas was with them, though the door was locked. Very important to understand. Jesus came and stood among them and said, what? Peace be with you. Now just put yourself there. So all the other guys, now they got the cheese-eating grins, and they're looking at Thomas. Yeah, see, we told you. And Thomas is going, uh-oh. And I love what Jesus does here. Look what he says. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand. Put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. Very important words, verse 28. Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. That is the first time in all of the Bible that Jesus is called God. You understand what a big deal this is? First time in the whole Bible, my Lord and my God. Then Jesus told him, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. That's you and me. I've never seen Jesus. If you have, cool. We'll talk about that over something sweet to eat. I have never seen Jesus. I don't need to see Jesus. I've got eyewitness reports about this. Tradition says that John died in his old age. He had been in prison for Jesus. Tradition says he'd been boiled in hot oil. All the disciples, every person that was in this room, they died saying, we have seen the risen Lord. Just for a moment. Do you understand the power of that witness? They understood he was the Son of God. As I told you before, John was the last one of the last, certainly the last gospel to be written, probably one of the last books of the Bible beyond the book of Revelation to be written. Look what it says in verse 30 of this same book. This is John's little note of explanation and motivation for why he wrote it. Jesus did many other miraculous signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in the book. Just real quick. If you put all the time together that this book takes, we don't even have a day out of 3.5 years. A day in 3.5 years. Because there's only these little snippets of time. Look at verse 31. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the what? The Son of God. And that by believing, you may have life in his name. John